We need to get on with our agenda.
No, Robert,
I'm
you have
going to
not.
ask you not to interrupt again.
I'm a board member, Robert. I can absolutely interrupt, but you got to answer my question.
I've answered your question.
You have not answered my question. Where are the rules that give you the authority to cut off public comment?
Randy, can we begin?
No, we're not going to begin. Where are the rules that give you the authority to cut off public comment?
From the Daily Catch, this is The Catch Up, and I'm Daily Catch editor Emily Sachar. And that was Red Hook Town Supervisor Robert McKeon quarreling with town board member Kristina Dousharm at the latest town board meeting Tuesday night, which centered yet again on the town's pursuit of eminent domain against the Red Hook Boat Club. Dousharm and her colleague, Ken Migliorelli, both newly elected board members, successfully argued to keep public comment open, but they were not successful in trying to halt the eminent domain proceedings, and they failed as well with their idea of a public referendum so the citizens of Red Hook can decide for themselves. Both of those votes went down 3-2. The town is still defending multiple lawsuits and has already suffered 2 court losses tied to this case. So where does the fight go from here? Reporter Athan Yanos joins us after covering another dramatic night at Red Hook Town Hall. It's the week of July 15th. Athan, you're officially a regular. Welcome back to the Catch Up.
Thank you so much, Emily. It seems like almost every night at Red Hook Town Hall is a dramatic night these days.
That's right. We're so glad you're here to tell us all about it. So on this latest meeting, Tuesday of this week, July 14th, let's start with the big picture. The votes didn't actually change the legal status, did they, of the eminent domain proceeding? So
No.
Why was this meeting still such an important moment?
Yes, I believe it was the first direct vote on the eminent domain proceeding. There were other votes tied to the eminent domain proceeding, but this was the first direct vote on whether or not to continue with the proceeding since almost a year ago when the board voted 3-2. And it gave the public the chance to see for the first time whether William Hammoud or Jacob Testa's position had shifted on the issue. I think board members Kristina Dousharm and Ken Migliorelli had been hoping to shift the opinion of at least one of those original yes votes, particularly Testa or Hammoud, and they may still accomplish this, but for right now, it showed the public and Kenny and Kristina that the 3 members that voted yes are still firm in their convictions.
So we still have 3-2 because although Christine Kane and Julia Solomon, who had been 2 votes of opposition, are no longer on the board, we now have Kristina Dousharm and Ken Migliorelli sort of slotting into those slots, but no additional people have come over to their side.
Exactly.
Okay. So the vote on the eminent domain action then ended up exactly where it has been for the past year, as you said. Were you surprised, Athan, that no one changed positions despite everything that's happened, including 2 court defeats in Dutchess County Supreme Court for the town?
I guess I would say I would have been surprised if someone did change their vote for a couple of reasons. Number one, I've had a number of conversations with Robert McKeon about this issue over the last 6 months, and he's been very firm in his position throughout, so I didn't expect him to change. And then Jacob and Bill, admittedly, are the town board members that I've talked to the least in the last 6 months, and that's mainly because they are less accessible than the other 3. But they've been hearing arguments against the eminent domain proceeding from boat club members, supporters, on social media, at board meetings, on people's lawn signs throughout the village and town over the last 12 months. And throughout those 12 months at board meetings and in other capacities, they haven't given any indication that they're planning to change their minds. And I also suspect that even if Bill or Jacob did decide to change their position on this issue, would likely be on their terms, meaning they'd come forward on their own with pre-written remarks or reasons for making that decision, rather than having a vote kind of spontaneously forced on them by the other two board members. Because remember, this was not planned in the sense that it wasn't on the agenda for the meeting. This was a vote that was brought to the table by Kristina and seconded by Kenny. So it was forced to a vote, but it wasn't part of the agenda item. They didn't really have time to prepare for the vote, although they probably could have suspected that something like this was going to happen given the amount of energy prior to the meeting. But again, it was a little bit forced on them from Kristina and Kenny. So I'm not particularly surprised.
So, Athan, you have no inside knowledge that either Kristina or Kenny had been lobbying, for example, Jacob Testa to try to get him to flip over.
I mean, I know that they are hoping to convince both Jacob and William Hamill to change their vote. What that looks like in terms of, as you say, inside lobbying, I'm not entirely sure. I know that they've been trying to talk to them outside of the board meetings and work their way to get them to see a different perspective or change their minds. But I don't have an exact answer for you in terms of, whether they're meeting every week or they're, having a coordinated coffee chats to try to get them to change their position, or they're sending them materials. I don't have that kind of inside knowledge for our listeners.
So thank you, Athan. The meeting sounded remarkably tense, not just from the clip we just played for our listeners, but just from your article that ran yesterday. Paint the scene for us, Athan. How many people were there? What was the atmosphere like inside town hall?
Yeah, so to give you an idea, I had known that there was going to be a lot of people there. And often when there's these big meetings, it's very hard to get a seat, particularly if you're late. So I had planned on getting to the town hall early. I got there around 7:10. But I had gotten texts from various sources that as early as 7 p.m., so 30 minutes before the meeting started, there were 30 or so boat club members waiting outside town hall with protest signs against McKeon and the eminent domain action. So already 30 minutes before the meeting, you had a line of people outside ready to go. And then when it got closer to 7:30, more and more people poured into town hall, as I had predicted, such that many of the attendees had to stand in the back or even in the hallway. McKeon estimated that there were 80 people inside. I'd say that's about right. And then you had the village police department were there. So Lieutenant Hildebrand, Sergeant Sterrett, and two other officers were also, flanked on all four corners, just in case things got out of hand. And most of the people in the audience were either wearing boat club gear or had signs or placards or little whiteboards that they were waving. So it was quite tense. I'd say during the portion of the meeting that was dedicated specifically to the eminent domain proceeding, McKeon rarely got a word in without either sighs or pushback or comments from the audience, kind of pushing back against what he was saying. Of course, that wasn't everyone in the audience, but most of the time McKeon spoke, there was kind of like this noise from the audience against
and trying to get back in control of the meeting.
The audience was pushing back on what McKeon was saying, and he was having a hard time articulating his positions and talking over the crowd at certain points because they didn't like what he was saying.
Yeah. Okay. So, Athan, as we noted with our opening clip, one of the biggest flashpoints seems to have come during public comment when McKeon tried to limit the number of speakers. Tell us more about what happened and why was that such a dramatic moment?
Yeah, so speaking of tense moments, and there was a bunch of them, this was probably the most tense. So to back up and tell this from the beginning, the board had several things on the scheduled agenda that were not related to the eminent domain proceeding. But it was clear that the majority of the public, if not all of the public, came to the meeting to hear and discuss the eminent domain issue. McKeon stated at the beginning of the meeting that he had scheduled a representative from the town's engineer, Ty Bond, to come to the meeting and begin a presentation on grant applications. He told me later that this was supposed to take place at 7:50 p.m. It turns out he also said that there was no time limit on when the representative, Randy Nelson, had to leave, or at least that's according to him. But he said that she had an hour commute to and from town hall, and he didn't want to delay her start and have her get home later than she expected. That's at least what he said. So anyway, before the public comment period began, he announced that it would only last 15 minutes and be limited to 3 minutes per speaker. So in essence, 5 speakers would get to speak. Naturally, more than 5 people lined up at the microphone or behind the microphone to speak. And when the 6th speaker came to the microphone, McKeon tried to cut them off and was like, sorry, that's it, we're done. And of course, to make this even more dramatic, that happened to be Richie Ross, the boat club commodore, which created this like dramatic but also kind of absurd scene where Ross and Brandy Nelson stood at the microphone together, waiting for final orders from either McKeon or Kristina. At one point, Brandy Nelson had her hand on the microphone arm beneath the microphone, while Ross stood over it calmly, and they both weren't really saying anything, but just standing there with their arms crossed, waiting for the matter to get resolved, while McKeon and Dousharm battled it out over whether to allow more of the public to speak. And I think we played that audio at the beginning, but basically McKeon claimed he had the authority to limit public comment, and Dousharm disputed that fact. Eventually, at Dousharm's request, the town attorney got involved and said that although the town's rules of order state that the public comment period should last for 15 minutes, it could be amended in a meeting by a motion. So Dousharm made that motion to extend the public comment period, and it was first seconded by Migliorelli, and then something happened where there was a discussion about what exactly it meant to extend public comment period, and Jacob Testa and Bill Hammoud wanted a more concrete definition of extending the public comment period. So Kristina made a new motion to extend the public comment period to include all the people that were currently aligned, and there was about 7 or 8. And so when she made that motion, Jacob Testa actually seconded it, and it was supported by the other board members 5-0. And so I guess the significance of this was it was one board member, Kristina Dousharm, and the public standing up to McKeon and quote unquote winning, I guess you could say. So in a sense, a sign of McKeon's vulnerability because his authority was successfully challenged in the meeting.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, we can say that he was accommodating these speakers, many of whom we've heard from multiple times in the past, to make a public record yet again, right? So he wouldn't be accused of shutting down debate or shutting down discussion.
You mean McKeon?
Yes.
Yes. He initially tried to stifle the public comment period, or I guess I should say limit it to 5 people. And it was only after there was this vote on Kristina's motion and the other 4 board members all voted yes that I think McKeon, because he didn't want to look like he was the only one trying to stifle or limit the public comment, he voted with the majority. But initially he did try very hard to limit it to just 5 people.
Yeah, got it. So as you've been saying, the newest town board members, Dousharm and Migliorelli, were elected largely because they opposed eminent domain. And just to remind our listeners, they were elected in last November's general election. They were sworn into office on January 1st of this year. What arguments, Athan, did Dousharm make for reopening the issue now and pushing it? Because it actually, as you said, it wasn't on the agenda. So what did she decide? Why now? And what were her specific arguments?
Yes. So in our, I guess you could say, exclusive interview with her after the meeting,
yes,
and we have an audio clip, I think, that we can maybe play of her saying exactly what I'm about to say. But basically, she cited the most recent decision by Justice Maria Rosa to strike down the town's 2 zoning laws related to the eminent domain proceeding that was challenged by the Red Hook Boat Club, a new lawsuit by former town attorney Albert Trezza challenging McKeon's right to authorize outside counsel in 2 prior court proceedings, and what she characterized was momentum in the boat club's direction.
It felt like the right moment to bring up the issue. I mean, it's been, about a year since the previous town board took their vote. So it felt like the right time to bring it back up again.
And I think what she was referring to there was just there was flyers circulating online and in person telling people to show up at large for this specific town board meeting and to force another vote on the eminent domain issue. And so those were the 3 points that she laid out.
Got it. She also proposed, did she not, exploring a public referendum if there was a legal way to do it. Is that, Athan, actually possible under New York law, or was this more about making a political statement?
Yeah, so I think the key clause in her motion was if there is a legal way to do it. And this is tricky because McKeon stated very clearly, both in the meeting and after the meeting, that a public referendum for eminent domain is not possible. And there's also, I looked this up, there's a recent case in the town of Milo in the Finger Lakes where the town is also in the process of an eminent domain proceeding, and the issue of a public vote was raised in March 2026. But it was determined by the town supervisor and the board that that was not possible under state law. And based on what I've read from New York State municipal law, the only challenge to an eminent domain proceeding can be in the courts, which the Red Hook Boat Club is currently doing. There may be a judicial loophole that I'm not aware of, or McKeon's not aware of. I'm not an expert in eminent domain law, but I suspect that Dousharm also knows that it would be tricky under current legal standards to bring the eminent domain vote to a referendum, which again is why she framed it as being contingent on there being a legal path to do so. Now, transparency was a big part of her campaign and something she spoke a lot about in her first year on the town board. So it seemed to me that this action was about telling the public, hey, we're open to letting you decide on this matter, even if there's no legal way to do so. If there is a legal way to do so, we will allow you to do it. So to answer your question, it seems like it was a motion about optics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my familiarity with permissive referendums, as they're called, is they're usually invoked when there's an expenditure of public funds. So a tax issue or a bond issue or something like that, where we need the public's approval. The town needs a town, a village, a municipal governing authority needs permission of the voters to go ahead. So, yeah, well, we'll see. Maybe there will be some kind of loophole. And as you mentioned, the eminent domain action is pending now before the Second Department of the Appellate Division of State Supreme Court, which is separate from the other challenges we've had to the environmental laws and so forth and the zoning changes that the town has tried to make. So, Athan, McKeon defended continuing the eminent domain efforts.
I always ask myself, no matter what the decision is, what's in the best interest of the town of Red Hook? I have to think about all 11,000 of those people. So while you heard, some unhappy folks, what did we have, maybe 80 people in the room, something like that? You heard from, there were less than 10 people who were not boat club members or family members.
How did he explain his position to you after the meeting? I know you were able to buttonhole him for a couple minutes.
Yes. I think it was because we had Michael with me. He was more amenable to talking. Anyway, he said this time and time again. It's been a long-term goal of the town. This is his words. It's been a long-term goal of the town to have public waterfront access, and the location in Berrytown is the only option for the town to do so. The other one that he's consistently mentioned is Tivoli Bay, but because of severe erosion, he said that's not possible. In the, I believe it was May of 2025 public hearing on this eminent domain action, I believe there was a presentation from the town planner, Ted Fink, and he explored 5 possible alternatives to the Barrytown location, and none of them were found to be feasible. He's also said that, quote, people come up to him all the time and they talk about how great it would be to have a waterfront park. So he seems to be saying that there's this silent majority that does not come to town board meetings and does not make their opinion publicly known, but is in support of this action. I will say I did some research into his statement that it's been a long-term goal of the town to have public waterfront access. And I found that in the town's 1993 comprehensive plan, which is its current comprehensive plan, it says, quote, consideration should be given to the development of Hudson riverfront parks at Tivoli and Barrytown to provide townspeople windows on the Hudson. And then the town's LWRP from 19 states, essentially the town should, quote, undertake efforts to establish a town dock and park area or areas in Barrytown to provide public access for water-related recreation activities, including fishing and boating, end of quote. So that's what he's consistently said, and he continues to repeat it. It seems like there is some anecdotal evidence for his claim that it's a goal of the town to have waterfront access. That doesn't mean that taking the Red Hook Boat Club by eminent domain has been a town goal for a long time. I haven't found any evidence of that, but the existence of a waterfront park appears to be a town goal or public waterfront park. The question of whether or not there's this silent majority, it's something that Jacob Testa said in his justification for voting yes on eminent domain action back in June 2025. I have not been able to find a large majority of people who support it, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Perhaps they're just not willing to come forward. I don't know.
Yeah, and it seems to be a legacy issue for McKeon as well. He'll be long gone from government service when perhaps, I guess he envisions that people will be sitting down at the boat club property, savoring their time there. And in absentia, he'll know or feel that he brought them that great pleasure. So,
That's a great point. He's said to me on different occasions, even if there's widespread discontent for this action now, he thinks that, people in the future will be thanking him, and this will be like something that people in 30, 40, 50 years are praising him for proceeding with this, even though there may be opposition now.
yeah. He also defended, Athan, did he not, the expenditure of more than $300,000 for legal and planning bills. Let's hear from him now on that point.
When we conclude the final 2 elements of the Cookingham project, we will have, not because we intended to, we will have made so much money on that project. We will have paid for not only these legal fees, but any ensuing legal fees.
So, Athan, what is McKeon essentially arguing here?
He's making 2 arguments from what I could tell. One is a very simple argument, which is that the town's legal fees would be less if the boat club didn't file so many lawsuits or they stopped their lawsuits. And this argument is essentially that if the boat club gives up their fight, the town would have to spend less to defend itself against the boat club. Now, the obvious counter argument to that from the boat club, and one that's been made by the boat club, is, well, if the town gives up their eminent domain pursuit, then the lawsuits would stop, or their defense of the town's actions would stop. Classic who will blink first type of scenario that it seems like will be decided in the hands of the presiding judges. The second argument he makes is that the town is in such good financial shape that it could withstand the mounting legal fees without raising taxes significantly or having a significant burden on the taxpayer. And specifically here, he mentions the Cookingham projects, the completion of the Cookingham projects, which I assume he's talking about the profit from the sale of parts of the Cookingham property and completing those sales, which will give the town, in his words, a lot of money.
And these are the parcels north of the village on
North of the
the
village.
left and right flank of Route 9 as you head out of the village and out of town. Okay. So on the other side, of course, Athan, we have Boat Club Commodore Richie Ross seeming to acknowledge or concede that public testimony isn't likely to change anyone's vote on the town board anytime soon. Is the battle now shifting almost entirely from town hall to the courtroom?
Well, I would say that I think it's been in the courtroom, right? The boat club has filed 5 or 6 lawsuits, depending on how you count it, against the town board on the zoning laws and the eminent domain proceedings. And obviously, they have another federal lawsuit. And the town has lost 2 of these cases, as you've said already. So we will see what happens with the other 3. But it seems like the battle has already been in the courtroom. I imagine that you'll still have we guess, usual suspects at at town board meetings, trying to convince Jacob and William to change their minds. And I should shout out Roxanne Fisher, a Barrytown resident who comes to every meeting and consistently ends her public statements with, "It only takes one vote to end all of this." And she says that almost every public statement, reminds Jacob and Testa, and she's very determined. And I suspect that she will continue her battle. But in terms of the battle being in town hall or in the courtroom, I think it's been in the courtroom, and this meeting just confirmed that.
Okay, thank you. So there was another important vote Tuesday night that received less attention. It's a little less sexy. The board retroactively ratifying the hiring of outside legal counsel after questions were raised, I believe, by Al Trezza, the former attorney for the town, in a new lawsuit. So explain what that vote was about, Athan, and why does that one matter?
So this was a very long and detailed resolution, and it took me a while to fully understand what it was about. But basically, what it did is, in light of challenges to the town's legal representation, which you mentioned was from former town attorney Al Trezza, the board voted to retroactively ratify past legal work by Keenan Bean and Hodgson Russ, and to authorize both firms to continue their respective separate roles in the ongoing litigation. So essentially, what seems to have happened is the town board previously authorized McKeon to take action that allowed him to engage Hodgson Russ in the newest Article 78 case without formal town board approval. And that appears to have, there was a December 9th meeting where they went into attorney-client session and then came out and essentially took a vote on a resolution that said, approving what was discussed, or authorizing the town supervisor to do what was discussed in the attorney-client session. And then when McKeon and the town board were challenged on that authorization, so on McKeon's authorization of Hodgson Russ in the most recent Article 78 case, they are essentially correcting for that ambiguity. And so saying, we, the town board, retroactively ratify an action we already authorized, i.e. the engaging of Hodgson Russ and Keenan Bean, to make it abundantly clear that the town board authorized Hodgson and Russ and Keenan Bean to do their respective legal work. So essentially, it's a preventative measure in light of the lawsuit, the recent lawsuit, as you said.
So does it essentially shut down that lawsuit, Athan?
No, I don't. I don't suspect it will, and I don't know. We'll see how Al Trezza and his attorney respond to the town's actions, but I think it at the very least puts the town on firmer ground in that lawsuit, because it explicitly says, we, the town board, at that date gave Robert the authorization to do this, even though we didn't formally approve Hodge and Russ to engage in these matters. So I suspect, and I don't know, and I don't want to speak ahead of what's happened, but I suspect that the challenge will still be that, well, on that date, the town board didn't explicitly authorize Hodgson and Russ to represent the town in the Article 78 cases. What I imagine happened in that attorney-client session is the town anticipated that they were going to get challenged on these zoning laws because they had previously gotten challenged on these zoning laws. And so the town board at that time authorized McKeon to respond to a lawsuit anticipating that they would get sued on those two zoning laws. But I don't know for certain. I don't know for certain because it was done in attorney-client session. But essentially what's important about this vote is that it is a corrective measure or a precautionary measure to firm up the town's case in the existing lawsuit.
In that suit. Okay, perfect. So, Athan, to wrap it up here, what should residents be watching next? Should they be waiting for court dates? Should they be waiting for decisions coming out of the appellate division? Should they be waiting for the town to redo its environmental review of the proposal after the defeats in the Dutchess County Court? Tell us what we should be looking for next.
So a couple things, and I don't have a great answer for this question because there's a lot of things that are up in the air, but one date that we do know is taking place is McKeon, Hamel, and Testa are all up for re-election in 2027. I don't know how long this eminent domain action is going to last, but if it's, as is expected to do, lasts until then, that'll be a major kind of the closest thing the town could have to a referendum on the eminent domain action. In terms of court dates, there's 3 active lawsuits, and we know that also the town is planning to appeal the decision on Judge Rosa's initial Article 78 ruling for the zoning laws. So all of those things are important to pay attention to. In the boat club's direct challenge on the town's eminent domain vote, the boat club's last brief was filed on May 21st in response to the town's reply brief to the boat club's initial brief. So I imagine a decision from the court will follow sometime in the future. I could not find from the New York court system available information when that decision is expected to come, but hopefully it'll be soon. My advice for people, though, listening would be that if they want to make sure they have the most up-to-date news on this subject, they should follow the Daily Catch, because we will continue to report on this matter and likely get information on any updates to these cases or to the developments as soon as they happen, and we'll report them out as such. So that would be my humble advice.
Totally non-self-interested advice.
Yes.
But we're a nonprofit. We're not in there for the clickbait like people accuse us of sometimes. This is all public service journalism. So absolutely. And
but it is true that we have developed good relationships with sources on both sides, and usually we are the first to get information on this case. So it's biased, of course, but it's also, there's a degree of truth to that.
Absolutely. Biased and true. I love it. Well, Athan, thank you so much for coming on the show yet again. We can't wait to have you back as the Boat Club saga continues, or, as we just said, as other Red Hook news plays out front and center. So thank you.
Thank you, Emily, for having me. I really appreciate it.
And that concludes the catch-up for this week. Thanks to Matty Rosenberg, Jen Hammoud, and Esther Martell at our partner, Radio Free Rhinecilff, for their help in producing this episode. We'll see you next time.